Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Turning Points podcast. My voice is extra low because we just traveled a bunch and I'm tapped out from an amazing retreat that I'm exhausted from. And we had an amazing conversation with Jac O'Keeffe, a Ireland native who now lives in Kauai and don't even know how to define what she does, but she's an explorer of spiritual teachers and guidance in all things life and discovering the ever-present expanse that is available to us.
Jac is a spiritual leader, teacher, and author of books Born to Be Free, How to Be a Spiritual Rebel. Ooh, that sounds good. How to Be a Spiritual Rebel. She's also the founding member of the Association of Spiritual Integrity, which we talked about a little bit, and I'll put a link down, which it's an organization that encourages spiritual teachers and the community to support one another in a process of growth and spiritual development. We had a fantastic conversation with Jac. She is full of life, full of levity, full of wisdom. She shared a little bit of her story, which I think you can hear more of at Buddha at the Gas Pump, which I'll link. But she also shared some of her wisdom and the things that she's doing. And I just thought she was pure joy.
Yeah, genuine process, genuine integrity, and really looking at yourself over and over again and really discovering that expanse. It was fascinating. Kind of blew my mind.
Take a listen. Enjoy.
Yes.
Hello, Jac. Welcome to our podcast.
Hello, Corinne. Hi, Sean. Good to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to talk to you.
Yeah, this is thrilling for me. Another Tiruvannamalai connection. So hopefully we'll talk about that at some point. We'll see where spirit takes us. But we will start with the first question, which is, many seekers can recall that point in time when their childhood beliefs no longer worked for them. So do you remember, do you have a point when you became a seeker?
I was never a seeker. That word never made sense to me at all. I felt I was being pushed. I felt like there was a fire inside my belly. I didn't know I was running away from something, running towards something, looking for something. And I remember like one of my sisters saying, "What are you looking for? What's all this motivation for? You want to do this and you want to do that. And you're doing crazy things with your life. Like, what are you looking for?" I'm like, "I'm not looking for anything." Mm-hmm. But sometime this push will stop. I just know it'll stop. I don't know how. I didn't know anybody else who felt this push from behind. I remember saying things like, it's like there's a high-speed train pushing me from behind. And something in me said, heck, go for the ride, Jac. Go for the ride. Go for it. Even though it felt like it was too fast and too strong at times, But I've always had a fair bit of courage. And I'm like, I don't know what this is going to do to my life. It turns it upside down and inside up, inside out, which it did a few times. Something was saying yes, because heck, what's the alternative? Another half asleep life? At least this one has the capacity to surprise me and surprise me and surprise me and surprise me. So one day the push did stop. It did stop. And it didn't start anymore. So I was never a seeker. So it just proves that, if you're not a seeker and something is pushing you inside, or there's a fire in your belly pulling you forward, go with it anyway, because that's, I guess, seeking in another form, not looking for anything.
Did you have a trust in that momentum, that energy you're talking about? Did you trust that as from an early age, or was it something that you just had no choice but to succumb to?
Yeah, good question, Sean. I think until I discovered that it was something to do with spirituality, I think it largely would have come from trauma. From, our rhythm gets out of sync when we're traumatized. And so that's how trauma played with me, was with a speediness. Now, my natural personality, I'm a fire sign and all that stuff. Like, I'm speedy anyway, but there was something in there that was traumatic. And when I did enough psychotherapy and felt that I have to do this psychotherapy, I'd come home from therapy and my husband would say, why do you do that shit? Like, you come home and you're just crying all evening, you're in pieces. I don't know, but I have to go back. I have to keep doing this. I have to just keep moving whatever wants to be moved and heal whatever wants to be healed. And when it became about, oh, wow, this is about stillness inside. This is about a shift in perspective. I didn't have any language for awakening or enlightenment at this point. And so there was an inevitability about that push when it was psychotherapy, and when it was about spirituality. Yes, faith was kicking in, trust was kicking in. And then I was knowing, okay, this is about something that's nothing to do with religion or anything external. This is about inside. It's not just about healing my psychology. This push is bringing me into this sector. Oh, then was I prepared, because the taste of the sacred was coming up in little droplets, you know, and something new. Oh, this is so worth it. I'm totally jumping both feet in. So yeah, I did trust it. I did trust it. I did.
And did you have, you're from Ireland, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did you have any kind of religious background that you were raised with?
Yeah, we were raised Catholic, but the Irish Catholic in Ireland actually is much looser than the Catholicism that would be in Spain, in Italy, and in the US even.
Wow.
So it was much looser, you know. So yeah, sure, that went on. It introduces you to the sacred and to kind of ritual and sacrament, and something got ignited there. But I've watched a couple of your shows and noticing the emphasis on turning point. Where were the turning points? And a different type of turning point showed up for me when I paused listening to your podcast and saying, what kind of a turning point actually made a real difference? And there are two little stories I'd like to tell you.
Absolutely.
And one is when I was 14 and I was in boarding school. And one of the girls in my class brought in a photograph that her mother had taken of the sky. And in the cloud formation, a dead obvious statue of the Madonna and Child was in the sky. I mean, it was like, the way sometimes you look at clouds and you go, oh yeah, it could be this, it could be that. I mean, this could only be one thing. We were looking at a statue in the sky in a photograph. She took the photograph in one of these Catholic shrines. Now, a sacred shrine where Mary appears, or where, whoever appears, whatever being or light or savior or deity appears. For me, it's usually about a vortex that's in the planet. There's some synchronicity there in the earth that allows a sacredness to happen above. And we have built pyramids on top of these sacred sites and stone circles, and along came religions, and we've built mosques and synagogues and churches on top of these sacred sites, And this sacred site of where Mary appeared, I guess over 100 years ago now, is where her mom was. And she was out, visiting these places, and whoops, her camera moved up to the sky and she took a photograph. So the daughter had this, and I was so excited, and I didn't understand why. That was the first big, what's going on? What's going on? Some crack happened there at 14 that it took me 30 years, 40 years to understand. You could just add decades, after a certain time. It's like, no, I'm not adding 3 years, I'm adding chunks of 10, So, and what happened for me was that I knew this is really important for me. This is amazing. I ran out of class. I disturbed another class where there was a teacher who did photography after hours with students. Sir, is this a real photograph? Is this photographic paper? Is this an actual photograph? And he goes, oh, okay. Sorry, class. Okay, what's going on here? I was like jumping out of my skin. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And it was a real photograph. And one of the teachers pulled me aside and said, why don't you calm down? What's wrong with you? For half this day, you're like, and we've said it in the staff room, you're just jumping out of your skin. And I said, I don't know. I don't know why. It'll pass. It'll pass. I don't know why. And what was happening was that a deeper movement was happening and my mind was watching it. My mind had no control. Some other process was using my voice, using my mind, using my body, using my intellect. And my mind was going, what the beep? You know, like, what's this? So I was watching my personality. I'm like, okay, what is that? What is that? That there's something else inside. I'm not going crazy. What is it? That was a significant turning point, because then I knew there was a crack someplace inside me to something that was more pure, wasn't afraid, was authentic, didn't give a crap how it landed with anybody else, wasn't aware of any consequences, was full of joy, was bursting to be set free. And I don't remember seeing it again till I was 35, maybe. And I was at a retreat. And this time, my life was about spirituality. I was at a retreat in Spain. Was it in Spain? It was in Spain, in Granada. And at the time, I was working with a master whom I had never physically seen, but it was there was a school set up by him, and his disciples would come and give retreats. And it's a very pure school. And his photograph was there, and we were in a deep meditation, and I saw a house, a stone-washed house with a red brick archway. And I went up to the door and knocked at the door and stood back. And the master opened the door. And he said to me, you come in, and my husband was beside me. You stay there. And I turned to my husband and said, okay, I'll see you after weekend. I'll see you. This is all in a vision now. I'll see you soon, maybe after the weekend. And I walked towards the door and he said, you don't get it. You can come in here, but you have to leave him behind. I'm like, for a while. Like, there's no reason I should leave my marriage. I leave for a while. And he said, you don't get it. You leave him and everything and come alone, or you stay outside. I went, shoot. Okay. I've got to do this, I said to my husband. And I walked in. And the vision stopped and my body went into shock, complete and total shock. And looking back, I think the shock and the grief and the recognition that my life was going to go absolutely upside down and inside out all came together and was processed way too quickly for my system. And my body became completely stiff, like rigor mortis, and I started hyperventilating. It broke up the whole room. They took me out to the sun. Nothing would stop this. And they were like trying to, 3 or 4 people trying to open up my arms, and it would spring back again. And I wasn't doing anything. I was like in the shock and in the horror of trying to stay breathing and trying to calm my breath. And one woman got a bucket of water. She threw it over my head and it broke. It snapped my nervous system out of the traumatic response. And, oh, thank you. Came out of me. I thought, okay, that best thing, bucket of water. Okay, all right, I'm here again. And then the tears started and I cried and cried and cried and cried. And I knew when I came home, babe, we're together for 23 years. It's done. Something has broken inside me. I'm done. So it took us a few months to split up and, a spiritual decoupling and all the rest of it. It's like, I'm done. It's all over. I have to walk this path. Can't I come with you? No, then it won't happen. And this is, I've no option here. My family were saying, choose to stay with your husband. God doesn't split up marriages. I'm not splitting it up. God isn't splitting it up. My body has to walk in this direction. The decision has already been made in a vision. This is what's happening. I'm just going to have to swallow it and hope to heaven that it's the right thing. I have no clue, but it's what's happening anyway. And that was the second scenario of, all right, my mind is going, holy crap. And something is already streets ahead. And my mind is trying to process the shock, the trauma, way behind, trying to catch up. They were the two turning points of moments of recognition of what it feels like to have pure consciousness, pure awareness, navigating everything. And what everything, as in what I say, what I do, what I think, my actions, every movement, the recognition that that's actually what's doing all of this. And my personal autonomy is watching and trying to play catch up, and my body's trying to process, and it's doing its best to catch up, you know? So those two incidences were turning points in the recognition of what awakening actually is. But it took me another chunk of years to put it together, you know?
So may I ask how long? So you said you were 35 when that second stroke happened.
Mm.
How long had you been studying spirituality up to that point? 5, 10 years, 15 years?
I went into psychotherapy when I was 19. So I was chiseling away at the ego and patterns and belief systems and fears. I was hacking chunks off that all of the time.
Gotcha.
And then when I was 30, my third eye opened, meditation started, chanting started, being interested in inner peace. It's like, oh, this is what's happening now. Okay, I gotta go here. Oh, okay, I gotta go here. This speed has now become about go within, go within, go within, go within. You know? So knowing that it was a spiritual thing, when I was 30, that started. And this was 35 of like, okay, this is where it's going to go now. You know?
That's interesting because relationships change, of course, over time, and you often hear, when people start into new endeavors in their life. But it sounds like that marriage that you had, there wasn't tension or necessarily about you having a spiritual life of any kind. It was he wanted to come with you on the journey. So that's unique. That's unique in that it wasn't otherwise, a friction situation, but you also had the trust to listen to that spiritual gravity within and go anyways.
That's right.
There's gospel stories of that where, you called into certain situations that won't necessarily make sense and you just have to trust God.
That's right.
That's hard. That's big.
And knowing that is deeper than your mind, that you got to do this. You got to do this. And it's like the decision is already made inside you. Mm-hmm. And your mind has to tease it out with your friends and, have nightmares about it. And your mind just does all that part, doesn't it? Like, that's where the doubt abides. That's where, oh my God, I'm too scared. That's where the fears abide, And the knowing is like, you can dance there if you want, or we can just go ahead with the plan here.
Yeah. Yeah. Awareness is always waiting for us to participate with it, right? I mean, it is there whether we participate with it or not. And it's something that, ever patient while we go through the mind chatter.
And when it is running the show in spite of our willingness or lack of willingness, that's gold. That's magic.
Yes.
That's magic. It's like there's enough of a crack in my sense of personal control that something has enough autonomy to take over. Yes. And that's grace, when that stuff happens. Because then you can really see, oh wow, okay, this is coming from what I really am, and this is what my thoughts have decided should happen. All right, okay. Which one do I invest in? Which one am I going to bank on here?
Yeah, and that's an interesting way to put it because, we spent a retreat weekend kind of talking about, focusing your attention on your thoughts or focusing your attention on awareness. And I would imagine most people find it difficult to choose between thoughts and, mindfulness and awareness because the thoughts are so attractive and they so want to steal your attention. But it seems like the way you're describing it is you had a very keen sense of observation of those two things of presence, awareness, this energy pushing you this way, and then the thoughts, and you made a conscious decision to go not with the thoughts. Was that something you had to develop, or was that kind of part of your experience?
That's a good question. For those incidences, I had no option. I had no option. Awareness was having its way with me.
Yes.
And then for that to stabilize, and
Yeah.
my work now is all about stabilizing people who are awake, stabilize it. For that to stabilize in me, my brain, my personality had to come to a recognition and a wisdom of no matter the thought, it will always go belly up. Always. Invariably, if I like, screw it, I'm not going to bother meditating. I want to have a glass of wine instead. Invariably, it'll bite me in the ass. And I kept saying, now remember this, Jac, if you have one, your thinking becomes foggier, your resolution to go for truth. It's like the knock-on effect is so not worth it. Now, I'm well able to have a glass of wine with the next person, but there was a time when every distraction was toxic. Because in that moment, I was saying, hey, God, you can wait. Or emptiness, or whatever we want to call it. You can wait. This is more important. It's like, well, then actually you don't really want to wake up. You don't. You haven't seen that investment in a thought leads to a weaker resolve, where there will be greater investments in thoughts, where your thinking mechanism will present a reality which you now believe to be true and which will bring you to suffering. It will, sooner or later. It will bring you to suffering. And seeing the first point, it's like somebody gives up smoking. Don't have that one cigarette. That's the only one you need not to have. Just don't have the one. Because then you're, then the game is on again. So there was a long period of no. Every time I am saying no to pure awareness, and I'm saying yes to the delicious distraction of thought. Yeah, I want to play another bit. I began to recognize this bites me in the ass every time. When am I going to get it? When am I going to get it? It's worth it. Just one more dive. And then a few days later, man, the connection it's so hard to find it again. What was I thinking? Why did I think that would make me happy? What was going on that I thought that would make you happy? So I started understanding thoughts to be sugar-coated poison. They're sugar-coated poison. Don't get fooled by the candy component, Jac. Don't. And when it happens often enough and you see the pattern, you're just too long in the tooth, I've been around the block too long. That absolutely will not work. That is a road to hell for me. I'm not doing that to myself anymore. So for me, it became, I'm not putting my attention on any thought at all. There are no exceptions. My mind is absolutely wanting to reinvent a believable reality. No, absolutely no. And so that's really when I became, walking the final stage of the path towards an abiding enlightenment,
Path towards an abiding enlightenment.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good title. We have to remember that one for her talk. That's good.
Yeah.
That is good. And so do you mind, is there like a time frame of that, do you think? I mean, not that it would ever be the same for everybody because it's all different and we don't want goals, but just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that happened when I was in India. So it'll be almost 20 years ago. Okay, I'm in couldn't be right math-wise. Hold on. I just figured that out. Maybe it's about 15 years ago, 17 years ago, maybe. Maybe late 30s, maybe. I think by the time I was dipping into India, early 40s. It's not that long ago then. I'm not completely sure. I can't pinpoint it. I'd have to sit down and do the math, which my brain isn't cranking up very well right now.
Yeah, that's okay. And then did it that sweet tooth go on for a couple of years, or did you get it pretty quickly?
It became part of my practice for years, actually.
Yeah.
For years, it's like no thought,
Yeah.
nothing.
No
This
candy.
is I will, candy.
Yeah.
I will, view and participate in this thing of life, knowing that my mind is creating it. That somehow, a concept is creating this. And sometimes I would know it and I would see it. And sometimes, of course, I'd be holding on to a spiritual concept. Okay, some part of me knows that this is a belief. I'm believing it right now. It really seems to be real. But some part of me has an ability to know that I have put these images and these stories together and made it about me. Some part of me knows that this is BS. Oh, you see? So sometimes I had to trust a spiritual concept, and sometimes the awareness was there.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's really important and helpful for anybody listening or anybody in that process at whatever degree of that process, in whatever that process, because I think there's this misconception that, you know, teachers or leaders or, you know, gurus or of any kind don't struggle with that, and they don't often hear the stories of how they've struggled with it or how long they've struggled with it, and I
Yes.
think it's very important to showcase that because
Yes.
and that was showcased with Don and Patty at the Wellbeing Center in, you know, in a lot of ways. It's like this mechanism of the mind wanting to distract doesn't go away easily by any means.
Yes.
Maybe never goes away. It's always going to try.
Yes.
So the abiding, you know, commitment that you're talking about, and that process of constantly inviting awareness,
Yes.
that is the key to keeping those thoughts from infiltrating the focus. But
Yes.
it's not something that just, oh, you reach awakening and it's gone. The mind has changed. There's no thoughts. There's none of that. That's not.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to be a common thread with people who
Yes.
understand awareness.
Yes. When enlightenment happens, uh, all of a sudden, there tends to be a phase of no thoughts.
Mm.
It's a big danger when we start teaching during that phase. What happens is if people start teaching during that phase, they're not ready. They haven't gone back into life to test how does the rubber hit the road. And when the mind starts cranking up again, they've got this persona and they think, no, that can't be happening. No, that can't be happening. I'm imagining that. Oh, I picked that up from my students. Oh, that's their projection. Oh, I'm processing their stuff. And all kinds of wacky avoidance and denial mechanisms are being used by the mind instead of, I'm right back where I was when I'm seeking. I'm right back watching my freaking thoughts. I'm right back there. Here we go again. And I'd love to see more honesty and for people to take many years after an awakening before they start to teach. Because the mind stops for many of us, not for everybody, but the mind stops. Don't teach then. Wait till it cranks up again.
Yeah.
Wait till life bites you in the ass. Now you'll have a little bit of wisdom, you know, because after that phase, it's then where you have to start removing shadow parts from the personality and being honest and cultivating humility and you know, learning how to open your heart to integrate the awakening, learning how to be respectful of Maya, the illusion, not dismissing it as not real, but to be respectful, because when it's real, it's real. When it's real, it's real. So it's kind of like, you know, you can play toy trains with a little child on the floor. You know it's a toy train. The kid might actually really be driving that engine for a little while and really in the game. But does that mean that you dismiss it? Oh, stop, you're not the train driver. Just put away that game. You know, it's like life is a toy train set too. It is. And when you're believing it, the experiences are intense.
Yeah.
Suffering hurts and the joys are frigging great, but they're very short-lived.
Mm.
And are we going to dismiss that because it's not real? No. It's like the compassion and love that you would have to get on your knees to play with the toy train with a child, you know, and go choo-choo with the best of them. You know, it's like without any judgment on the child, participate.
Yeah.
And with an open heart, that's what I think a more integrated teaching modality would look like. You know, which would be, hey, I can empathize. Maybe this is where you're at. Is this where you're at? Come on, let's lift you up from where you're at and move things around for you rather than dismissing people's experience. Because when we dismiss students' experience, what's happening is that we're dismissing our own capacity to create experience.
Mm.
So it's very telling, you know, you get to spot the red flags. When a teacher is dismissing it's all illusion, it's like, yeah, that is avoidance that you have developed because you don't want to fully face up to the fact that your mind is doing this. So you have this dismissing thing, not this, of your own mind, and now it's being projected onto the students. Not appropriate, not appropriate. Your personal journey is yours, and your role of teacher is another thing. Separate the two. Don't give your unresolved stuff to the students. But we live in a time of where that still happens.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yes, a lot.
It brings up a point. I'm so happy we're going in this direction. I mean, whatever direction is fine. But, my roommate who gave me your book, my friend, our friend Patty, we've been discussing a lot. They've been discussing, and it's kind of more of a bit of a feminine approach. And there's been so many male teachers, and Tiru Vannamalai. That's what I love, Tiru, and I love the mountains so much. But I'll tell you, I could not sit in those satsangs. Like I could sit in with the mountain, no problem. But all those satsangs, they would drive me a little crazy. And and it was more so the teachers than the questions. It was more so the teachers like, oh, that's not real, and all the Vedanta stuff or Advaita is anyway. So I'm so happy to hear you say this because I'm hoping that there's more, not just women, but a feminine perspective,
Yes.
an open, compassionate, authentic, all-inclusive perspective that has compassion for students wherever they're
Yes.
at.
Yes. Yes. That's right. It is a patriarchal model, that is competitive
Mm.
and has a facade and wants to uphold the facade, and it is I suppose, moving the male gender towards, hey, vulnerability is as natural for you guys as it is for us. We might have been classed as being over emotional, but maybe there is a middle ground of where there is space for emotional content, for experience, for a deeper level of honesty, for our humanness. Can we meet at the shared level of humanness? Our humanness doesn't get enlightened. Enlightenment is for the mind. It's a shift in perspective, you know? So there seems to be a coming together of the positive of the patriarchy and the positive of the feminine. And what would this look like? And it really, I see it as part of the great transition that's happening in so many sectors, like it's like, hey, we got to do our bit too in terms of spiritual leadership. We've got to get our act together too and stop being so dismissive of various human experiences, and to be inclusive, as you say, Corinne. It's
Yeah.
an interesting time ahead.
It is an interesting time, and you want to have strength, but we have strength. We use strength because we have insecurities. We
Yes,
use strength because we're afraid to feel vulnerable. That's
that's
kind of
right.
our social, that's the
That's right.
imbalance of, I think, the patriarchy
That's it.
is, well, instead of feeling this vulnerability, I'm going to overcompensate it with confidence, and
Yes.
and that's something that I'm very thankful to have had incredibly wonderful female energies in my spiritual growth, because one of the things I've struggled with is being vulnerable and being seen,
Yeah.
and the more the more you the more you play in awareness, and awareness befalls your perspective, you feel extremely naked, extremely
Yes.
vulnerable, and you can't hide no matter what you say,
Yes.
no matter what you do, and that's scary. I recognize that there's a fear there, and there's an aversion to that. There's no hiding. experience because we're used to using that and flipping it and having all these mental and social norms that we can hide behind to to compensate for that fear.
To
And
compensate.
so I liked how you married those two things um, because they're both very valuable and they're,
They're both valuable. We need both. We need both, There's a group of 14 women teachers, and we're supporting each other for just over 2 years now. We meet once a month, and we all love these meetings. And there is talk among a subgroup of organizing an event, a public platform, and of sharing our work on a feminine. Of course, conversations around the feminine have come up. And that subgroup, they weren't able to organize it. They're like, we're just too feminine. We couldn't get it together. None of us was a leader. We couldn't make decisions. We just couldn't do it. So we're handing it over to an organization who does this. And that's what we've decided to do. And I'm like, there we go.
Yeah.
There it is. Do you know? So the absence of the masculine doesn't make a healthy feminine. The absence of the feminine doesn't make a healthy masculine. And then there's a whole spectrum in between, which if we gave transgender, if we gave, more diverse sexual orientation, where it wasn't so binary, like outside of the binary system, I want to hear those voices. I want to hear those voices. What would that type of leadership look like?
right.
What would that type of leadership look like? Because we tend to be locked in and subjects to this binary system, and so like while we're talking about binary, it's like, hey, it's already there.
Yes.
The coming together of these energies are already there, but we don't offer that a platform as yet.
We don't. And what's interesting is that I think if you've been paying attention for long enough and you're present and you're aware and you're kind of looking at the global aspect of this, there seems to be this inevitable shift and movement towards this more healthy marriage of these energy fields, right?
Yeah.
And yet there's still so much aversion to it, which seems really silly because it's not, and we were talking about this on the drive home, there doesn't seem to be this big ask, like we need to flip everything on its end and
Yes.
break it all down and restructure it.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
what's being asked of individuals and cultures and society is to pause and listen. That's really, if you kind of are listening to the friction
Yes.
that we have, is why don't we pause and listen
Yes.
and give each other the value that they're due by having their perspective.
Yes.
And if we do that, honestly, we might learn something. But again, that fear really just clouds the judgment of everything, and so
That's right.
it's almost fascinating how.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
How we perceive it as a threat
Yeah.
when actually we yearn for it.
Yes.
We yearn for more openness and transparency, and to let go of the pretense that hopefully we're mature enough to admit that we participate in that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's happening.
It is happening. So let's get on board because it's fun.
Yeah.
I love change. I love change. My wiring, my personality loves change. I find it so exciting. It's like potential. It's like potential is here,
That Shakti energy.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. It's Shakti. It's full on Shakti.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I've heard you. I don't know if it's just my interpretation, but I'm loving that you've alluded to, or maybe even said that you're helping people who already have had experiences of waking up to abide in that. So is that one of your main teachings right now? Is helping people that have woken up?
Yeah, I work with people who were teaching, or who feel a pull to teaching, or who are teaching in some capacity, and have the self-honesty to realize, oh, I'm half-baked. Like, yep. All right. This is where we start.
Huh.
So, you know, letting people have autonomy, their own autonomy. It's like, I'll point you, but you're making decisions. You're the one who's in charge of your own path and your own growth. And to normalize, you know, the awakening might be stable. It's your human evolution that wants attention, that wants love, that wants resolution and understanding, and you know, to be able to surrender to the divine expression that comes through you, not just when you teach, but you know, how you rear your children and how you do your other job. Like, what is it that is the attitude of your mind? Does it go into victim? Does it go into I should? Like, what do you do with personal will? Or are you closer to being baked, where there's an ongoing capacity to be aware of the ground of being 24/7, and the mind is picked up and set down as it is needed, because all direction, as far as you know, comes from a deeper place. Then when a blind spot comes up, you feel a contraction. You feel it in your body. It's like something is off. Something's off. What did I say? What am I thinking? Something is off. You can feel it in your body. You know, when you've been awake for a while, when there's an abiding and awareness is the normal, and you're not in your head, you're present. That's who I really love to work with. You know, people who've been on the path for a long time, or have a spiritual maturity, and an awful lot of the work has been done. A huge chunk of therapy has been done, and a lot of spiritual practice has been done. And it's like, okay, where does it catch you now? Where does it catch you now? Because it can be karmic, it can be past life, it can be, and I have those tools to be able to go into the soul's journey to see where the glitch is, to see what is still tied in a knot and needs unraveling and understanding, to be integrated, to pull in all parts of your multidimensionality into this simple present moment. You know?
Yes, you're talking about the very subtle experiences, the things that after you go through the emotional traumas of this life, after the emotional traumas of programming from familial experiences, from, you know, religious experiences, and then you get into the shadow side, and you're, you know, the things you can't see, you see them, and then there's even more unveiling. There's even more subtle experiences or subtle things that start to say what they are, but you can feel that the thought mechanisms constantly trying to find your blind spots. And so what you're saying feels very real, because it and there's not a lot of people that I feel talk about it and have the experience of, because the awakening feels so good and it feels so real and it's so present there is a certain delusion that it will last forever, and that's a blind spot, right? You know, and so there's all these little things that are hilarious paradoxes to the experience, and so yeah, that's deeply felt what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is subtle, and you know, I suppose many spiritual books would say, you know, when you're done, you know. And you know, if you really are awakened, well, you'll never again believe the movie. And so that hasn't helped us, that kind of editing of the truth in order to what, market bliss or something. Bliss is a friggin' experience. I'll throw out bliss any day. It's like, forget it. Why do you want to feel bliss all the time? It's like, you just go and masturbate or something. Do you know, I mean, there's loads of ways of making you feel like cellular fantasticness, like do you know, like really, you know, so bliss is overrated. Bliss is every experience is part of the matrix, every experience. So there's nothing to sell here, you know, but if one expects it to be all over at a certain point, when one expects mind tidying up to be done and there's no more shadow, the only way that decision can arrive at is if you've shut down, if you've gone to a new belief system that says human evolution stops, and you've shut down your capacity to be open and willing. It means the absence of humility, it means the absence of authenticity, and it means dishonesty, and it means that you've bought something that your mind wanted you to buy. So we have to arrive at the place of it's never done, because to say it's done is catch 22. So it has to be that it's never done, otherwise you'll close over.
And you know, Jac, as you know, it's probably the biggest stumbling block in spirituality that exists, or non-duality, or all that in our world. It's probably what I've seen anyway. And I've even in doing the podcast, it's like, the big thing, that sticking point that I've been working with is that I have a big judgment against false prophets. I hold teachers to a certain standard. Mm-hmm. And I mean, who am I to judge? But boy, I'm glad to hear you saying that you're helping people, because I know that there's people there that have much to offer, but I'd like there to be a little more clarity first.
Yeah. And like since I started teaching, I dip in and out of psychotherapy. I get body work done. I had acupuncture done last week, and an old childhood memory showed up. It's like, am I going to just imagine that that's not there? Like, really? Yeah. Of course it's there. So far, I don't get caught in it when it comes up. I'm like, oh, look, there's another Jac experience, and I hold it, and it's just beautiful. I love it, actually. I love seeing them come up because a freedom that I didn't know was blocked.
Yes.
I didn't feel an invitation at all. But somehow, after that release, like last Friday of acupuncture, after that release, there is, oh, it's wider still. And I thought it couldn't get wider. And that happens every time. I thought I couldn't feel more freedom. This darn thing is really infinite. It's really infinite. It keeps surprising me joyfully, of like how free it can become, how deeply I can breathe, and how magnificent our beingness is. You know, and to allow these ongoing recognitions and growths and realizations to continually unfold. Like, get the hands off the steering wheel. Let it have you continually. Let it have your personality, your mind, your body, you know, like
constant and perpetual surrender.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, even getting stuck in the label of teacher and student, you know, because a teacher should be just a really great student, right?
Yes.
And that is, you know, when you identify with a teacher as on a pedestal or on a hierarchy, it's like, well, I might have been a student who's been mindful of being a student longer, but still just a student, and I'm not a teacher at this point. But that's what feels the most authentic, is one who recognizes that even as they're teaching, they're learning through that teaching process. At the same time.
And that they have their own support structures when stuff comes up.
Right. Yeah.
Because your students aren't your psychotherapist or your healer. Right. It's like, oh, I got to take that away, you know? Yeah. And then you go to your peer support group in whatever shape or form that takes. And those structures aren't in place yet, Sean. For teachers, they're not, you know?
And and also too, hopefully they're happening. But what I find too is that there is a resistance from the teachers to learn anything new, right? To go.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. That's right.
Once they're, you know, and hopefully the shift that's been happening since the pandemic is kind of shaking that loose a little bit.
Yeah.
I certainly know it has for me. I mean, I've been in monkhood really for the past year and a half, forced to not see anybody, meditate 3-4 hours, just really strip away the label of the teacher and be more. And it's been so. I'm hoping that that is happening for more and more people
Yeah. Yeah.
to hit the reset a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And that willingness to recognize the exquisiteness, the perfection of the imperfection,
Yeah.
you
And the
know?
vulnerability, the willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah, being comfortable with being vulnerable, you know?
Yeah.
Loving our growth spurts and not being challenged or not having a propensity to be shameful or to feel shame, to feel guilt, to feel less than, to feel you're faking it. It's like, hold on, what's underneath all that? Hold on, admit it and go underneath it. What's
Yeah.
giving rise to that pretense?
Yeah.
What are these emotions? Let them be here. What's underneath it?
Those four things you just said are things that like exactly what I'm struggling with right now. So, what you talked about
Yeah,
is that's perfect. That's funny. That's
yeah,
very funny.
yeah.
It like, was a lightning bolt that struck me, and that's what's, more experience in that vulnerable state, more experience in being, we said naked before God, it's
Yes,
that should reinforce the learning. That should reinforce the understanding and deepen the relationship with that surrender, with mindfulness, with awareness, and
yes,
it's conversations that don't seem to be happening widespread, and they're very valuable because there could be a rush
yes,
of people who have these experiences but don't have language or spaces of safe commune
yes,
to discuss
yes.
what those experiences mean or
Yes.
what they could mean or what they could
Yeah.
evolve in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
somehow Grace is organizing it because we're having the conversation.
Yeah.
We are. We
and
are.
and
Yeah.
obviously, Jack, you've described your beautiful teaching and also the support you have with the other teachers.
Mm,
I mean,
mm,
that's actually something that had come to me 2.5 or 3 years ago. I knew all these amazing women around the world, and what we were all like islands amongst ourselves.
hmm.
And I really felt the need to, that but it hasn't. I mean, you're inspiring me to maybe, reach out and
Mm, mm.
because, and even though it seems to sort of be happening on itself, which is fine too. I tend to need a really big shove these days and not just a
Hmm.
little nudge because
Yeah. 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 It goes like that sometimes.
yes, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. A few years ago, this topic came up at a conference in California, and three of us presented different angles on the same issue that we're talking about here. And we're talking about him here at a little bit more depth than what came up at the conference. And as a result of the conference, three of us who gave similar talks said, we should talk. We should talk. We're all onto something that's a bit smelly in our sector. And what came out of it is the Association for Spiritual Integrity, which is an organization that myself and Rick Archer from Buddha at the Gas Pump, um, yeah, and a few others are spearheading it. And there's like, I don't know, maybe about 350 spiritual leaders who've joined it and who are abiding by a code of ethics. And we're piloting peer support groups. What would it look like? What would be the guidelines of an appropriate peer support model for spiritual leaders? So we're doing it in an organized way. That's another thing to put on the table. Hey, it's happening here too. There's actually a 501c3. There's a charity organization that's doing this, So the website for that is spiritual-integrity.org. If anybody's, it's like there is no need to be isolated. If you are a spiritual leader in any way, join us. We're all wanting to do better,
I will
and to
join.
change the culture. Yeah, yeah, do. And whoever is listening, if they know a spiritual leader, it's like, hey, we can we can we can do better from conversations, talking to each other, understanding the nuances of what can happen in our work, where the traps are, set up support systems for ourselves. We need to organize ourselves in some way, or somebody else is going to do it for us, and that will not be pretty, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thrilled to hear you say this, and especially the fellow from
Yeah,
booth at the
Rick,
gas pump, because
what it
I've
is.
listened to some of his interviews, and
Yeah,
I really think he has a lot of integrity, and
yeah,
drawn to him. I was involved. One of my teachers added me to a group somewhere in the middle of the pandemic. It was like a private, WhatsApp group, and it was like very well known teachers that I recognized from LA and New York, like yoga type, meditation type teachers,
uh-huh.
all in this group. And it got really dark really fast. And I had to take myself out of
Oh,
the group.
wow.
And so I've been very weary because I've seen so much stuckness in some of the teachers that I, yeah. So I'm happy to hear you're doing that, because I'd love to see, more, because we're not all going to think the same way,
Yeah,
but to at least have the conversations, and
yes, that's it.
at least have
Having
the
the conversations.
conversations. Yeah. Because if we
Yeah,
can't do
that's
it,
of huge
if we
value.
can't
Yes,
do it,
that's right. That's right.
there's no, yeah.
Isn't it ironic, that
Well,
the mm,
that the
yeah, that spiritual leaders are resistant to change.
and have a very set view, and I just have seen it recently myself, actually. So a teacher of mine 20 years ago, who was just a very country guy, who actually had a spontaneous awakening. He's kind of a famous musician here in Nashville, but he's like totally awake, right? And he's like, 20 years ago, he says, Karan, you don't need all that meditation and that eating healthy. You don't need any of that. And I'm like, well, spiritual teachers and the spiritual belief system. You don't need. And I'm like, well, it feels good to me right now. And I just recently, just a few months ago, I really got what he was saying.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I was kind of pissed for a couple of weeks, thinking, have I just been so stuck and so like this and that? And yet I see that I have been pretty fluid and going from different books and teachers along the way. Like I
yeah.
haven't really stayed stuck for too long,
Uh,
and that obviously it's what I had needed along the way. But now I can
yes.
see other there isn't a need, and yet there was, because there was.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, and to honor it until it naturally falls away, because
yeah,
it wouldn't have served you to, like, okay, he said that, therefore I'm going to go against my own intuition here.
yeah,
That wouldn't
yeah,
have worked at all.
yeah,
But sure, maybe he put a seed in there, and which encouraged you to see it. But you know what? In a few years' time, you might go back to a spiritual lifestyle and healthy eating again, and maybe this time because your body loves it, because you feel better, because you sleep better. Like, there is no hard and fast of how it looks. There really isn't. But what there is brutal self honesty.
yeah. In the moment.
In the moment. You nailed it. In the moment.
And
Yeah.
that could change 10 minutes from now,
Yeah.
an hour, a week.
That's right. And be present to that.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
that sound is me stopping myself from just going into more and more stories. So
That's
I love
great. That's great.
fantastic. I think that's a wonderful tool, and I think that that platform, like you guys both said, it's if the leaders can't find at least a common place or a safe space to
Mm.
have conversations about the experiences as it changes, as it evolves, as the landscape changes, and then having to, reallocate that teaching to that new landscape.
Mm.
If that space doesn't exist, how do we evolve, through that process? Otherwise, you devolve, and then you have to build
Yes,
it back up again. And
that's right.
I
That's right.
and those spiritual and integrity, that's a very powerful word, and those things
Yes,
together, it calls out accountability. That's the hero's
that's right.
journey. That hero's journey is,
That's it.
yes, you're doing something noble, but can you do something noble with integrity as well? Can you do the righteous thing with humbleness as well? And can you
Yes.
And
be
be fluid.
and be fluid? Yes. And be on that pedestal for that moment while people are listening to you, and and have that big voice, but then humble yourself to the surrender and the nakedness that we've talked about,
Yes.
vulnerability.
And not to get off on the rock star or whatever you imagine you think you're being perceived as. You might or you might not be, but we don't know.
Right.
But not get off on the
Yes.
power or the adoration that is given to you, because that does need to wash out
Yes.
of the culture so that students have more autonomy. And so they're like, okay, I'm buying a service from you. You happen to be my spiritual teacher. And, you know, maybe devotion to themselves, like put a mirror on your altar. See how that feels. Put a mirror on your altar. You know, see what that brings up. See what that brings up. Why do you need an external deity to bow down to? And I can still do this in front of like a shrine, and I still do, because devotion happens. But I know it's what I really am manifesting as something in front of me. It's never I'm here and you're bigger or you're greater. There is no size at all. It's what I am is showing up, and I will bow to that. You know, without there being a cockiness in it.
Yes.
Coming from a place of love and sweetness and openness and oneness. And it's very different, you know. It might look the same, but it's very different attitude inside when our heart is open and we're willing to be naked, and knowing that of course we're fallible, of course we're human, of course we're evolving, of course we've got blind spots, of course we can be assholes, of course we've got boundary issues, of course. Like, do we get a free pass because we have an abiding awakening? Huh. No. Categorically, no.
No.
No. But it was good marketing for a few thousand years, you know? It helped. You know?
It was good marketing for a few thousand
Oh,
years.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's why I love Ramana and the mountain so much. It's like, yeah. But I'm just thrilled to hear you talking about this. So I'm gonna definitely make take from your website and put some in the liner notes and things so people can find you and find that website you mentioned. Also, can you share maybe with how you're working with people? Like, do you have? I think you said do you have some Zoom things and Facebook things that are happening?
I don't really like Facebook. I've never liked it.
Okay.
I actually thought it would never take off, but I was really wrong there. So quotes from something I've written go on Facebook, but I don't interact on it.
Okay.
The platform, I don't gel well with that, and so I honor that.
Okay.
I'm on Insight Timer.
Oh, great.
That app, yeah, I've started that a couple of months ago. And on Sundays, I run a Sangha for 90 minutes. It's a really nice community, actually. It's really nice. It's more on the mature side. Sometimes it's over people's heads, but people usually get some gem out of it. There's always some kind of a meditation with a teaching and a practical application. But it would be very much about working with shifts in perspective and what that looks like and what that feels like and how that shows up in your life. Then I do a private practice, which is always jam-packed. I do that 2 days a week. I do quarterly retreats usually. Since the pandemic. That's it.
Right. And how many people do you usually have? Because I had mentioned to you the well-being retreat. So their maximum, well, during the quarantine, their maximum is like 25, I think. But because they've been able to do social distance retreats the whole time because they have an outdoor pavilion, and then they have heated blankets. We wrap ourselves, and I mean, it's just been. I just taught a retreat last weekend. There it was right on the river, and then but once things open up a little bit more, which slowly they are, I think they can take about 42. So. Is that, or do you like bigger, or?
I usually go for bigger. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't thought about travel yet. I mean, I'm living on Kauai, so I've become a bit of an islander, and I'm like, an airplane, what do I want to get up in the sky for? You know?
Wow.
So everything is online right now. So I haven't turned my brain yet towards traveling.
Yeah.
So I don't know what way it's going to show up, to be honest.
Okay.
You know, Corinne, I don't know. I don't know. Bigger groups, smaller groups. It has yet to unfold.
Yes.
Well,
I love that
online for now.
Good. Well, I love that you're doing Zoom. I personally have been loving, really enjoying the Zoom that I've been doing. I've been even teaching yoga on Zoom and
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I don't do a lot of it. I just do like 2 a week, but I've found new language with it because it's
Mm,
different than in person.
yeah.
Super hyper focused present because I'm got to be there with my students, you know.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so I've quite enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you see, we can adapt to change
Yes.
voluntarily or when we have to. And either way, there's something to be learned. So let's go with it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
This is like the fastest. It's even more than an hour that I think we've done, Sean. For me, anyway, it's been the fastest.
Oh man.
Right?
Yes.
It just what a joy, Jack. I mean,
Yeah, we had lots to talk about.
and I'm sure we could talk for another hour easily. But I'm glad we got a little bit of taste of your journey because that was wonderful to hear, and I loved hearing about what you're doing right now. Thank you for that, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to have a resource to send people to
Yeah.
and to look up myself.
Yeah.
Thrilled.
Yeah. Thank you guys for the opportunity. It's fun to hang out with you both. You've got a nice dynamic going on here. I like it. Thank you.
We just basically make fun of each other most of the time and
That's
talk.
a good thing to do.
Yeah, and just talk about fun stuff. I mean, we've always been fascinated, and our I think our fascination has deepened. So it's really wonderful to, talk with you have a genuine passion for all things in
Mm,
mindfulness, and it kind of shows you
mm,
get to the deep core of things, and that's
mm.
wonderful. So thank you very much for joining us, and
Yeah.
I look forward to perhaps a future conversation.
Sounds good. Catch you guys downriver.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thanks, Jack. Welcome to the Say More section with Jac O'Keeffe. I find myself left very calm. I feel very at ease. I probably in deep contemplation. That's going to hit me after I don't have to think about recording more parts of this podcast. But I found her very present in awareness and very accepting at the same time. There was this, it's okay. There was this an okay calmness about her that I felt. As expressive and as passionate as she was speaking, I feel very mellow, which, as you know, is usually I'm all giddy and jacked up, but also we're coming off a retreat. Let me just go into the whole thing. So as it stands, we just got back from your retreat that you hosted at Wellbeing Center. So I had that, got back into Wisconsin, and then had this podcast right after. So it's all kind of just a little bit like, whoa.
Yeah, surreal a little bit. I mean, we left. You flew in Wednesday morning, and we drove to Wellbeing, and then we were there from Wednesday to Sunday, and then we drove back yesterday, and then you flew back this morning. So that
Yeah.
gives people a context. And we had a day of silence, and it was full on yoga, meditation, processing. So we were totally exhausted and comatose last night in a good way. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
beautiful retreat, but you flew today. You were in Nashville this morning, and then we're interviewing Jac O'Keeffe. Uh, now talking about her. So
And
yeah.
I was actually a little nervous about getting into the interview because I thought I was going to be um, too tired to be super present, but I felt invited. I felt invited by her to be present, and it was actually a really good balance because I felt pretty focused in the questions and everything. It was, I don't know, it was a wonderful space. I feel I feel a bit calm, but that's a weird space for me usually after these conversations.
Well, we were talking, one of our big ahas on the way home after the retreat, debriefing from a retreat on the 4 hour drive. You had said something about just reflecting into when you had a talk with Dawn or with Patty, and just being reflecting in their clarity, their presence, just made you feel just you were describing it. Do you remember how you were describing it?
Yeah, so there's and it's this is where language is tough, but there's a degree of awareness or the awareness in the conversation is so present and so on the forefront as you're talking with Don and Patty. and it, my experience with it is that there's an intimidation and a fear, and I expressed that with Jack as there's a vulnerability, and I recognize this, and it's a fear because I feel like I can't hide, and that's what awareness feels like, is you're seen completely, no matter what you try to project out, because you've had an experience and you've witnessed that, or been in the presence of that awareness. You recognize that it's everywhere. You recognize that it permeates all spaces and all matter. And so I felt intimidated by it, and then you said on the car ride home, it's like being naked before God. And that is the analogy for it. Um and so having that experience, and then having that realization of, yes, this is pure vulnerability, but it's vulnerability and it's surrender. I'm surrendering to that vulnerability, and there's this whole experience around that. It's pretty fascinating, and so maybe I do feel vulnerable, or maybe I'm comfortable in the surrender, or maybe I'm not worried about being uncomfortable in the surrender and being vulnerable. There's a lot of layers to that it could be, but trusting and embracing that, and that was Jack's main thing, is trusting in that spiritual background, that ground of beingness, that gravity, that force, whatever that might be, that intuition. And it's humbling. It's humbling because you recognize, and I don't want to say power, because that's the wrong word, but it is,
Clear.
sorry, the clarity, and it is the thing to humble yourself to. It is the allness to humble yourself to.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I just enjoyed the heck out of that conversation. I we talked about it before we got on the camera, but the way that we found Jack was, I met her. She knew my ex Satya. They knew each other from India, and so I met her, I think, before we got married. So that would have been about 13 years ago. And I met Jack in Tiruvannamalai, and we just had a nice conversation. But I always remember, and I think I saw her coming and going the guest house a few times. And just so I knew who she was, I knew she'd written some books, and I know Satya had mentioned her a couple times. And then Colleen brought her book home. Patty from Wellbeing had one of Jack's books, and
Mm.
Colleen's like, "You need to interview this lady," and I'm like, "I know that lady." And then I reached out to her assistant, who was really sweet, and she's like, "Yeah, Jack would love to be on Turning Points," and that's sort of how we connected. And so I just loved her willingness to come on with us, because she does teach a lot, and does a lot of YouTube, and does a lot of speaking engagements, and is a very well known teacher for many years, and has a lot of books, which I will link to. And she was just authentic, and I loved her levity. We talked a little bit off camera. I just loved her aliveness and her levity, because sometimes, we have all kinds of people on our podcast. We have authors and teachers, but we also have regular people. And so it's just, I love it when people that are sort of in the like teacher or author type um, genre, that they're just so real and authentic and humble. And I got so much out of the conversation personally, uh, because I loved her enthusiasm for, like, she loves change, and she's like, things show up for Jack, and that's what drew me to study with Alea one on one. Was that Alea, her thing too is like, I still have stuff that comes up for me, and
Right.
Jack was saying the still things. Some things still come up for Jack, and I embrace it, because it all there's always something that busts through, and it's even more expansion. And I think there's part of, like, for me, I had mentioned that there's that, like, standard I hold teachers to, which obviously is a standard I hold myself to. If you
Yeah.
I hold up the mirror, right? And so it's like, on one hand, like all of our qualities have a positive and negative aspect. And so on the negative aspect, it could be trying to be too perfect, or like she said, there's like this plateau you think you reach, and then you can start teaching, and then you have to be perfect all the time. And that's actually one of the things that my students say over and over again that they love about me. And even in the book, when I share different things from the book that's coming out, is they love to hear when I folly, when I fail, when I struggle. They love to hear is like, she is human. And I'm like, I didn't even realize you didn't think I was human. Like, or you have, but we do tend to put our teachers or anybody, rock stars or whatever, on a pedestal. And it's just, that aham brahmasmi that I love, above and beneath no one,
Yeah.
open to criticism, fearless in every situation. You know me, that's my prayer every day, 20 times a day.
Yes. And that is that that was showcased very deeply in the conversation about it's when you reach that point where you have to maintain a certain status as a teacher, you're forgetting to maintain the relationship with your studentness, with your learningness. And that's one of the things that particularly with the yoga, that it's changed, it's evolved from the teacher training 3 years ago. It's
Right.
grown and evolved because
Right.
and particularly this year, you were forced to adapt your teaching style from in person to on a Zoom. And there's a way to be about that, where it's like, well, no, the yoga is what it is and it can't be done elsewhere. You could be in that space. Or, all right, people still have a desire to have this, so let me explore that. And what comes out of that is a deeper understanding, even from afar, of alignments and subtle little shifts, and that's growth. And I appreciate that because you and I've had conversations, and I've expressed uh, there seems to be something within inside me that is gravitating towards a teaching role to a certain degree. I can feel it. It permeates that, and I think I brought that up to you. And I have I don't want to say an aversion to it, because it doesn't feel like an aversion anymore. But I am looking at it, and it is in part and parcel to what you're describing, where um, I'm afraid of the label, for sure, teacher. And I did like that. What came out of this conversation was a teacher is just another word for a student who has been learning for perhaps a little bit longer or a lot longer. But if a teacher just becomes identified with that role as a teacher, and isn't humbling themselves to that process of change and awareness and growth, then there is stagnance. And that's when I think issues arise from that. So there's a lot of that. And of course, that's, I'm looking at the conversation through the filter of, well, when will I teach and when will I not teach? And, and I'm all fixated on it because of my traumas with it, or my, perspectives or aversions to it. So there's always this subtle stuff that keeps coming up, and it shows you the expanse too. And sorry, now I'm just rambling, but we're so used to this gratification of setting a mark, reaching the mark, and then that work is done. We have this
Right.
path, which is so silly, because every single time I've gotten to that point, finished a task, there's another task. And so we're still fooled by this thought that this will come to an end and we will have it. Nothing in real awareness life, in the scope of that awareness, has ever indicated that change will stop and evolution will stop and new circumstances. There's
And
no
expansion, which
expansion.
is an evolution, which is all natural, that it keeps happening. It's all natural. I want to go back to what you had said about your hesitance in calling yourself and being a teacher. It's like, I think that what Jack was talking about, it's like there's still, and even for me, there's still baking. Like yes, I've been a teacher most of my life. I'm not stepping in, and I may not ever step in as a non-dual type teacher, awareness teacher, even though I do teach awareness yoga. And I did touch on it this weekend, but I feel like I'm still baking. Still, we've talked about it before. I'm still finding the language, and I think it's the same thing happening with you, Sean. I think naturally you're doing some life coaching with friends and family when needed. I mean, actually not when needed, when they ask. I mean, anytime. And you did the yoga training, and you keep showing up. Now you're kind of stepping back into assisting, and I think it's just going to be natural. You will know. It's like Jack even said, you can feel it. Sometimes you just need to bake a little bit more, because if you go out too soon, it's like awkward. It's clumsy.
Yes.
And so you're just baking a little bit more, but it's obvious to me. And even the girls who were at our training 3 years ago, Wendy and all those ladies, they were like, yeah, Sean is going to be an amazing teacher. Not just yoga, but just a spiritual type teacher. I mean, that's you will be. That's you are, and you will be.
And that's what is becoming that's what's becoming clear in these conversations is in so what I'm looking at it is, okay, I'm going to, or how I have been looking at it is, okay, I'm going to go from student to teacher. And really the natural progression of it is stepping into that role to become a better student. That's
Yeah,
you know,
if that helps you to look at it that way, that's awesome. I love that.
that seems to be that seems to be the phase before me. But there's time and there's life and there's other things, and how it unfolds is going to be, it'll be interesting. But I there was some really unique perspectives and language from her angle, um, that those little tweaks that happen. It's like, interesting, interesting. And so there's a lot to sit on. There's a lot to chew on in that conversation, and in the thoughtfulness of that conversation that I, especially after this weekend, I haven't actually settled down yet from everything and really unpacked it in my own space. Of course, we had 4 hours of unpacking it together, but that thing that happens in
But
your
we were eating junk food the whole time, and
yeah,
so
yeah.
there was.
We did the road trip thing. We got a little naughty with the snacks. we, you know what? That was great learning because I actually, we got back to Ivy House and we both felt like, ugh. And then we had this amazing salad, and then it was like the medicine kicked in right away. And even when I got home, I was just like, "Ooh, I need some life. I need some lightness. I need some, it's good to know where your boundaries are and test them again a little bit." And
Well, and Jack talked about it. She's like, with the glass of wine. Let's say she called it the candy. She's like, whenever there was a time period when she calls thoughts that are just sugar coated, they're like candy. And so if she would have more than a couple glasses of wine, or a couple glasses of wine, or not eat right, or not get enough sleep, that would be a slippery slope of maybe falling into more believing the thoughts and believing the stories and stuff. And I certainly go through that. And then you come back to it and it's okay. Like, that's the thing, is that you kind of leave. It's like it's that full circle hero's journey thing.
right,
And just kind of recognizing where you are on. That's why the hero's journey is such a beautiful wheel, is to kind of see where you are on that journey,
right,
because it's a long journey, and it can still be. That's why it's a spiral. It's not just a one circle. Life's a spiral where there's many hero journeys. That's why Labyrinth is good. But I like how Rupert Spira says, just to see yourself clearly. And people keep showing up to be a mirror so that you can see yourself more clearly.
yeah,
And I said in our closing circle at the retreat yesterday that everybody was grateful and they learned a lot, and I learned just as much from each person as they feel they might have learned from me,
yeah.
because we're all mirrors.
It's a safe space to reflect all of that in, and you when you're in it and you're paying attention and you're seeing all the reflections of yourself and them back and blah blah blah, and it's just like this room of mirrors, and it happens in unity, and it's so humbling. It's so humbling because it feels like it deepens your compassion for each other, because the more you see that reflection in each other, the more involvement you have in that mirror moment, the more it's like you're looking at yourself and wondering, why in the world would I hurt myself?
Right. That's the thing, is it's the more we're connected in the oneness, interconnected, you or me, namaste, and the less separation, the less us and them. It's just seeing the beloved here and the beloved here.
Yeah.
And yet that's become our language and what's working for us right now, because we love Delia so much. We love Dawn. We've been listening to a lot of Rupert Spira. And then obviously Jac is on a similar path, but also different. And that organization that she mentioned has all people, teachers of all cultures in there. So they're not all going to have the same language.
Yeah. And yet they discovered a tool of integrity to align with, to anchor the conversation to.
Yeah. Yeah, she described that in the conversation after, how they created what did they call a code of ethics?
Yeah.
Was it? And she took them 2 years to do it, because here you have, it's the same with people that of communal living. Elizabeth Lesser talked about, just how it failed after 10 years. It's like human beings, it's hard to live communally and to listen to each other. So I'll be curious. I mean, I'm excited to go to the website. I can't remember what it is at the moment, but I'll have it in the liner notes, and I'm going to go check it out in the next few days and read what they've come up with as their code. And anybody can join. It seems like if you agree to what their codes are. So I'm excited about that, because I've always said, if the spiritual teachers, whatever that word means to you, if the people that believe in the oneness of all things, which I think most traditions, or if not all traditions, believe in the oneness of everything, if those leaders can't get together and listen to each other and expand and learn and grow, then there's no hope,
We're fucked.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful thought. I don't want to say it's a wonderful thought process. Boy, it is hard to come to that. I have so much baggage around my perspective around that I'm trying not to project, because it's like, whoo, that's a big undertaking. And so
well, that's why I'm glad that somebody else organized it, so then I can just be a member.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I don't know that I'd want to be a founder of that.
I'm too, man, what a deep look. What a deep look into spiritual integrity to that magnitude, really. I mean, I'm just getting comfortable being, vulnerable to awareness. I'm just getting comfortable with that, and so, I mean, I didn't mean to say it. I have a deep respect for that endeavor, to the degree where I'm terrified by it, and terrified of my own, projections and baggage of it. So I'm very, very curious about that.
Yeah, me too. So let's check it out.
Yeah, man.
So great conversation. And I'm excited also to reach out to Jac and see for other people to interview other people too, because I have a feeling she's going to be a great resource to recommend others. Because we had talked about it on the way of I've sort of been reaching out to my pool of Chopra people and my Nashville people, and I have reached out to a couple of podcasts that I've heard, that people that I didn't know. But I want to be even more diverse and maybe get other traditions into interviews. So we'll put that intention out there and see who shows up.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Jac, again for joining us. That was delightful.
She was awesome.
Delightful, and looking forward to seeing more of what she has to offer. And until next time, thank you for joining us. I love you.
Make sure you subscribe and make a comment. Please make a comment, because it helps the algorithms find us and helps other people find us. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Send it to your friends. We'll keep on doing what we're doing.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night.